Why do you have to have different pronunciations of magic systems? You have mana, you have mana. Why do you need to have two different words for the same exact thing? Maybe there's some philosophical difference behind that. One's mana, one's mana. I know there's no difference, but it bugged me. Just throw that out there. Welcome back to the Sanders Review. My name's Caleb, and I love finding brand new stories to talk about and maybe introduce you to some stories that you might be interested in, or maybe you've already read them. I don't know. My apologies for how I sound. I'm getting over a cold, so I may be a little, But we've had a really good week. We actually decorated for Christmas. My son really enjoyed decorating our Christmas tree, and we had to make sure it was baby-proof because my 1-year-old will try to climb and grab anything. If you're a parent, you know how that goes. Well, recently, before Thanksgiving break, into Thanksgiving break, I discovered a couple new books that are in the LitRPG genre. If you've been watching my channel, you know I've been reading a couple of LitRPG series recently, He Who Fights with Monsters and Dungeon Crawler Carl. In fact, I have a few videos about that, which were really fun to make, and I've gotten some good feedback from, which has been really enjoyable to see and find people who are interested in those same style of books. And so I thought, you know what, let's find a couple random books that I have not been recommended, that, although I have actually been recommended since reading it, but, anyways, just full disclosure. And so I found these two books and decided to read them. Got one on Audible, one of them got through the local library, and wanted to read them and compare them, not in a versus style format, but just to be able to say, here's some amazing stories that you might be interested in hearing about. So the two books that I want to talk about that I read recently is The Primal Hunter by Zogarth and Ritualist by Dakota Kraut. Quick summary, starting with The Primal Hunter. It's a average day at an office building where you follow this man named Jake Thane, and out of nowhere, on this average day, the world gets sucked into a multi-dimension because the universe has reached the population threshold to become part of the multiverse, which is a pretty interesting concept. Immediately, Jake is launched into this magical kind of tutorial where he selects a class where he has to then start off with people from his office, only a few people, and they're among 1,200 people in this tutorial that they have, I believe, 40 days to rank up and survive in this arena. It's a big, massive world of forests and mountains and valleys and rivers and dangers and animals. And it's a very interesting place to be dropped at, and he chooses to be Archer, thus the Primal Hunter. Jake and his fellow office workers, who he's cordial with, maybe not friendly with, all of them, they set out to survive and grow and explore this new world, and using the LitRPG magic system, which if you're not familiar, think about any type of role-playing game or a game like The Witcher or Skyrim, where you are upping a class and building skills and getting new equipment. That is basically what it turns into, and you get those experience and that goods from the animals you kill and from other people and magic loot boxes and things like that. And so the book turns into a survival as long as possible type book with a bunch of twists along the way, but I won't get into that because, spoilers. Jumping over to Ritualist by Dakota Kraut, it starts off with the discovery of a weird gemstone type orb from the bottom of the ocean that has some manner of power attached to it. It gets hooked into the grid, and that's all you know. It gets hooked in, there's this massive output of power. Well, you jump forward an untold amount of time, and you follow a man just known as Joe. He's a army medic who, through a series of things, you get to know him, a little bit about his character, and he gets in an accident. And let me just say, the writing of this book makes you really feel for him, especially when he wakes up. We'll just say that. If you've read it, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Well, his mom wins the lottery, and he has all this money, and all of a sudden he finds out that there's this new video game that you have the opportunity to become a part of. Literally, your body gets destroyed, and your mind becomes a part of this new world, and you have a chance to achieve power, immortality, basically, and achieve a life again, especially after a horrific accident. What Jake does, and this is anything you would figure out just by reading the description online, is Joe goes in and he chooses a class after kind of a testing trial and all that nobody else has taken before, and it's a secret class. He chooses to be a cleric, which is kind of a medic, and he then sets out to find power and grow and explore this new world. I think it's called Ardania. a very traditional, if you've ever played Skyrim again, it's a very familiar setting, and LitRPG genre is not meant to be maybe necessarily the most creative and amazing of writing, but it's just something that can help you with a little bit of, I don't know, escapism and be able to enjoy a really creative world as you put yourself in these characters' boots, to be able to grow in power and prestige and wealth and just all the experiences that come along with it. If you ever played a video game, you know what I'm talking about. I do have to say the two covers of these books are really interesting. They're what drew my eye, and then come to find out that they actually both have been read quite a bit. Primal Hunter, I believe, has like 10,000 reviews on Goodreads. Ritualist has a bunch as well, and so I'm completely new to this, coming into these books. Only the third and fourth series in the lit RPG genre that I have found, and these covers don't give anything away, but they do, because they give you an idea of what the tone of these books are going to be, with the Primal Hunter being a little more grim, a little more lonely, we'll say. I mean, Lone Hunter, or Primal Hunter, Lone Hunter. And then Ritualist, you just see this amazing world with a very interesting scenario at play that just kind of draws you in. Again, not to go into like a versus battle of these two books to choose which one is better. I just want to maybe compare certain elements of these books and then tell you which ones I liked more, but it's not necessarily a versus battle. Starting off with writing style, The Primal Hunter by Zogarth is a very descriptive book. It's almost double the length of Ritualist, and so there's a lot of description, there's a lot of exploration that happens, and it can actually get a little monotonous for me, for reasons which you'll find out later regarding the main character, that the reader just kind of has to kind of plug along. And it was very descriptive, and we'll talk about more things in world building, but it describes it in a very descriptive way that is very familiar to anybody who has played a good RPG or who has read any other lit RPG books. Very similar, I would say, in the He Who Fights with Monsters kind of vein, whereas Ritualist is very fun and creative. It's just a fun video game style world, massive city with surrounding wilderness wildlands that you go out to try to level up. And so the writing of both characters is done well, but I would say a little more lighthearted humor from the Ritualist goes a long way. I really like added humor into a story. It's not ridiculously crazy, Discworld or any of some of those books, or even into Dungeon Crawler Carl, but it just has enough humor in it that just really adds into the writing voice. And so I really do fade more to the Ritualist side of things, but they're both well written and good books, but I personally go more towards Ritualist. Let's talk about world building. When it comes to the Primal Hunter, you get this multi-dimensional, the multiverse that Earth has become a part of, which creates a lot of opportunities. You have gods and ancient beings that are becoming a part of the tutorial, which, I mean, come on, tutorial for what? There's so much expansive opportunity there, I would imagine. And the Primal Hunter, I believe, is like a 10-book series, which that seems really long, but it seems like there'd be a lot of opportunity for exploration of a lot of themes and a lot of characters and opportunities within this series because of that. But these ancient beings step into this tutorial because this new dimension being added creates opportunities for power and prestige within the cosmos, within the multiverse dimensions. And so there's a lot of really interesting elements at play in the Primal Hunter. There's also a lot of mutated animals and magical creatures that you have to fight, and they get stronger as you get stronger, and to be able to level up and get more powers and more gear. And it just creates a very interesting and very familiar but very exciting at the same time opportunity to read and enter into that world. Now, in the Ritualist, in the world of Ardania, you have very much that video game style where you have a massive city surrounded by wilderness with all of the creatures, many of them kind of humorous, almost kind of like a jackalope, unicorn, rabbit thing, wolves. I mean, all the different creatures that you go out further and further and it gets dangerous and more dangerous. And it's very familiar with a lot of video game logic, the setups and everything. And there's a lot of hint for a lot more. At one point, Joe kind of sees what further skills and what you have to grow into within this video game world that he's now become a part of permanently. And there's a lot of promise for future. Now, both of these worlds I think are very interesting. I would say that the scope with the gods and everything of the Primal Hunter creates a lot more interest and a lot more intrigue, especially with like god level politicking and stuff like that. But Ritualist also gives a lot of opportunity for, hey, this could go anywhere. And it does, because I've read further books in that series, and so it does. Now, when it comes to magic, because they're lit RPG genre books, in the Primal Hunter, you have what's called just the system. It's just introduced as, oh, one ancient dimension. They figured out that they just called it the system, and it's magic, and just become a part of it. And maybe in future books, you start to understand a little more about what the system is, but it just becomes very generic. Just, oh, the system, and then the use of mana being at play in terms of your magic points and skill points, and you learn new things, and that's just kind of the way it goes. And it's interesting, but it's not necessarily the most engaging of magic systems, but there's opportunity there in the future. Whereas in Ritualist, very similar kind of magic RPG style video game system, which you're able to, it should be noted in Primal Hunter, you can only die once and you're just done. It's life, just like Dungeon Crawler Carl. Whereas in Ritualist, it's a video game. You die, you reset, you lose experience points, you reset the next day, and during that time period, you can engage with the outside world through the internet, and then you go back in, which allows a lot more interesting stuff. And it should note that in Ritualist, they call it mana, which, I mean, let's just say, why do you have to have different pronunciations of magic systems? You have mana, you have mana. Why do you need to have two different words for the same exact thing? Maybe there's some philosophical difference behind that. I have no idea. If you have a clue about that, please let me know, because it kind of drove me crazy listening to the audiobooks of these books, being like, one's mana, one's mana. I know there's no difference, but it bugged me. Just throw that out there. So the magic system, both of these, I mean, it's kind of a watch. I would say maybe Ritualist, because the stakes with the reset of your life allows you to get in a lot more ridiculous situations. Whereas the Primal Hunter, yeah, there's a lot of danger at stake, and it gives you a little more on edge, but you know that they're going to get out because plot armor and stuff like that. And so it just helps me maybe get into the more fun of the Ritualist a little bit more, but it's interesting video game style mechanics, but nothing amazing to talk about. Now, when we talk about main characters, this is where these two books really diverge. In the Primal Hunter, you have Jake Thane, who is very much of a loner. He chooses a hunter class when he comes into the tutorial, the system, for the first time, and almost immediately within the opening chapters, you figure out and you learn that he's not a Mary Sue. If you know anything about characters, Mary Sues, they're ones who have basically abilities without earning it, but you learn that he took up archery before because it was a sport that he could do by himself, and so it's like, okay, I understand. It just seemed very convenient. I grew up doing archery. I love archery, but it just seemed a little convenient to the story. I don't know, it just a little contrived. And then him jumping into the opening situations, his personality, I don't know if it's because of the system, I don't know if it was part of him, maybe that's something they go on later, but Jake gets into some situations that you're just like, this is not normal, and you're reading about it without knowing him first. For instance, the first time he kills people, he takes joy in it, and it's like this upsurge is, okay, is it that magic, or is this just part of his character? And maybe that's part of the process of this book, of getting to know that, but it just felt like at the stakes there, without knowing Jake and without knowing his relationship to the people around him, their reactions, it just felt a little canned. But later on, he does step into the alchemy route, which poisons with hunting dangerous things. It just kind of makes sense. And it expands his character a lot more, but he maintains that loner status that just kind of gets a little monotonous to read. Just saying, for me, a little monotonous, especially with the length of this book. Now you flip over to Joe in Ritualist, and you have this hidden Ritualist class where you're learning all this magic, and you have this lore that you can find and learn, and deep guarded secrets in dungeons. And then you have him hiding himself and being able to adopt other things, like being a cleric that he can help out in his guild, which he's, not many people are clerics if they're jumping into this video game. And he just is able to expand in possibilities, I would say, and power and freedom in a way that Jake, I'm sure Jake, it's set up that he's going to be this man. I mean, the Primal Hunter is set up to be an amazing title, amazing series. I'm sure it goes somewhere. So if you've read these series, please let me know if the Primal Hunter is really goes somewhere. Ritualist, same thing. I'm waiting to try to get access to a few others, and then waiting on Audible to get a few more credits to be able to get a few more books there as well. But both books are very engaging to read for their main characters. I would say for me, Joe is a little more interesting to read about because you get to know more of his backstory at the beginning, and it's just something you just have a little more buy-in more quickly, which I wish that the Primal Hunter had given you more backstory and didn't kind of hint things along the way about something that happened. And then the big reveal at the end of his defining moment that led to him being more of a loner and antisocial has already been told early on. And it's just not that big of a reveal. I just wish there was a little better character development of the main character. And when it comes to side characters, I would say both need work. These books are very much focused more on the world building and on the magic systems and just kind of the exploration of those things with the main character. In Primal Hunter, the side characters are more interesting than the main character in many ways, but they're also one-dimensional except for a couple of major characters who go in with Jake into there, his friends from the office that he worked at. But the villains are a little one-dimensional. You wish you'd known them a little bit more, although the main guy, I can't remember his name right now, but Matthew, I think his name is. But as you go along, you get to know the villains a lot more, and you come to hate them, but this, like, you wish there was just more there. Maybe that's something that happens a little more. Whereas in Ritualist, you get to know these side characters a little bit, but there are people that just check into the game and check out and come along, and the NPCs in many ways are actually more interesting than the real people, which maybe that's what Dakota Kraut was trying to go for. But the main characters are definitely where you're kind of drawn into these stories, and you then have that dichotomy of one being a loner, one being very driven to experience all there is, and engaging with NPCs and other people alike. So it's kind of an interesting play between these two books. Now, of the two books, I prefer Ritualist more, and I've read further into the series. Primal Hunter, I don't know, after the first book, I don't know. I'm struggling whether or not I will go back into reading it. I would give Primal Hunter probably a B-, something like that, like a C+, B- range, whereas Ritualist I would say is a much stronger book. I give it to a B+, and further books go on even more into like the A- range for me, and it's just more engaging for me. But every single person's different. Hopefully you, if you've read these, you can take something away from this and try one or the other of the books. Let me know if there's other areas where I need to kind of explore, and if you've read these series further, let me know which one I should either continue reading or get into. These are fun to make. I get to film maybe every couple of weeks because, you know, teaching and kids and life and all of that. I'll be doing some end of the year wrap-ups here as well soon. But I hope that you have a fantastic day. If you're interested in LitRPG books, I actually did a kind of versus review of He Who Fights with Monsters and Dungeon Crawler Carl. That'll be up here. And then YouTube will give you a random video up here as well. So I hope you have an amazing day. Go read some amazing stories. God bless. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.